I'm looking now at the foot of the Worktable sawmill and looking to build the cranking mechanism that'll pull the saw forward through the log. So my thought here is I'm going to use two pieces of Douglas Fir. Funny enough, these were actually cut off on the sawmill. Bolt them in place with these long carriage bolts, a hole drilled right through the foot. And then I have a 1-inch dowel that I'll be running through here. So I have to drill the hole next for that 1-inch dowel that'll go through here, and a rope will wind up around that. To get the rope through to the other end, I'm going to drill a hole through here. It'll just be a little bit larger than 1/4 inch. And I have a couple rollers that I'll put in place just to kind of guide the rope through that hole. To some pulleys at the far end, and I've got some pulleys that I put together on my 3D printer. I'll show you those in a little while, to take the rope over to the other side and pull on the other side. So let me start by clamping these two pieces together and drilling a 1-inch hole to accommodate the dowel that'll wind the rope. So loosely holding the pieces in place, this is what I'm intending. This will be a crank out on this end, obviously, but that'll just spin freely. Rope attached to that, and we'll just kind of wind it up and pull the thing in. So here's the tricky part of this drilling operation. This bit in the drill won't go all the way through. So what I'll be doing is using this piece as a guide, because I know this hole is 90 degrees. It went through on the drill press. So I'll use this Douglas Fir as a guide to get me through about probably that far as I can go. Take that off, and then this hole should be straight, and I should be able to go all the way through, coming out the other side. So I'm putting a bolt in here to keep this in place. Now I can move the clamp around so I have access to the other side and drill that hole. Be able to complete the hole. Now I don't expect those to be perfectly centered. However, what I do want is now to line up the dowel. Then I'll clamp that piece on. Yeah, that hole went a little skewy, but that's okay. I'll never know. So I just want to get our dowel in so that it will spin freely. Clamp this piece in place. I forgot, I've got a long drill bit. May not be the sharpest drill bit, but it is a drill bit. Okay, we got one through. Excellent. Just move the clamp around. All right, we're making some progress here. So these are carriage bolts. I've got a flat washer here and some, I'm using a nylon insert locking nut. Okay, there we are, we got that on. This will wind up. One more step along the way. There's the rough cut handle. I decided to make this a little foldaway handle, so when not in use, that handle will drop down. That way when I'm walking by, I'm not going to be constantly banging against it. So that's our progress for today. We'll pick up again tomorrow. So today I'm going to be working on this crank, giving a little bit of shape, smoothing out some of the surfaces. We'll drill a hole through there so we can mount a bolt and clamp it down onto so a bolt will run through here to clamp that, keep it on the shaft. Contour the handle a little bit, make it a little bit nicer, and then work on the crank. And then find machine something here to make a handle that'll mount into the crank, and again a bolt will run through here so that the handle, when not in use, can kind of fold down out of the way. So I've done a little bit of sanding just to smooth this off a little bit, but I'm going to run it through the router and just give her a small round over, 1/8 round over on this crank. That just gives a much nicer feel to the piece. A little more sanding, and then we'll work on the handle part and drill some holes. All right, I want to put a round peg in a square hole. So what I will be doing is cutting 3/16 of an inch off each side of this dowel. So 3/16 off here, 3/16 off here, and then that'll slip into that slot. All right, I've got the handle now mounted onto a little, I'm calling it a positioning block. So I can set this up against the miter. I have the fence set exactly where I want that shoulder to be cut. So I'll just make a few passes through like so to get rid of all of that one side, and then I can flip this piece over and know that I'm getting exactly 180 degrees from this cut side. So come over here, push it up against the fence, and now I can get exactly the right shoulder. So I'll go through that step now. And there's our shoulder. Let's see if it fits in the crank. It fits, but it's a little snug. So a little bit, just enough that some sanding will make that fit really nicely. Excellent, worked like a charm. Just sanded that off a little bit so we have a snug fit, not too snug. Next step will be go over to the drill press, and we'll drill a 1/4 inch hole through here to put a bolt on it. And with the bolt in place, and a little bit of sanding on these edges and this edge to allow a smooth transition. We've got our crank in the handle on the crank in the cranking position. And when it's out, when we want it out of the way, it'll just fold down, drop out of the way. For use, out of the way. All right, I'm gonna drill a hole through here now to get a bolt on so we can mount that onto the spindle. And there's the crank and handle. So that'll be the motion to bring us along, and the handle folds out of the way when we don't want to be bumping into it all the time. For use, out of the way. Now the spindle here is held in place. I've got a washer on the other side. I'll take you off the stand here and show you. So I just put a large washer on the end of that dowel with a screw in it, just to keep it from sliding back out. So there's no pressure on it per se. It's just kind of keeping it in place. So as we wind our crank, away we'll go. All right, next I'm going to get a hole drilled through here and get our some rope. And we'll start laying out the path for that. Okay, so I just drilled a hole through the leg of the Worktable sawmill. So our rope will go through that hole to the other side. What I'm going to do now is just use my countersink bit to give a little flare on that hole. I'll do that on both sides. Got a little adapter, away we go. So that should make it a little bit easier for the rope to go through there. The intent, what I'm going to be using for a rope is just some 1/4 inch cotton rope. We'll see how that works. If it doesn't work, then we can move to something else. So my little piece that was on the 3D printer is this little bracket, which you can see has a groove cut in it so that it can slip over the end of the bed rail. And I also printed a little pulley that sits in there. This pulley has a bearing on each side of it, so it's a bearing running on an M5 bolt. A couple of bearings in there so it rolls smoothly. And it will slip over this bed rail. I have to take this bolt out, just like that. So that'll slide in a little farther. And that will then guide our rope from this side over to that side. I have another pulley on that side that'll go up to the leg of the sawmill. So this rope is going to come across here. Let me move the camera. So the rope comes across the bed rail here to this foot. I have another little part. This was a prototype. It's not the design part that I want. I have that one is now printing. But fundamentally, it's just a bearing at the bottom and a bearing at the top that'll sit on the foot like this. So the rope will come in the bottom. Kind of like that. And then over the top bearing, through the hole, and over to our crank. Here's another little funny tip. So the end of this rope was frayed, so using my handy dandy carpenter's Band-Aid, just wrap the end of that rope with it, and now it just slips through that hole. No trouble at all. So that's the path that our rope is going to take. I'm going to put a little eye hook in the far leg, tie the rope off there, and then start winding it up around here, and let's see what kind of movement we get. All right, let's give this a little test. Ignoring this piece here that will eventually sit on there. I'm just going to put it down here for now. So we give it a little crank. I really like how that rolls. Now these guys here, I'm going to put them on here a little better. I have stop blocks on here at the moment. A bolt with a nut on it is a stop for the sawmill, but this will perform the same function. So I'm going to take that on, slip this on both sides, and see how that works. So one of the first things I'm curious about is what happens to this handle as I'm pulling it back. All right, let's run that again. I'm very happy with that movement. And just going through that motion, I'm not really sure that this little guide is going to be necessary. It'd be nice to have, but I don't think it's going to be absolutely crucial. In fact, I do kind of wonder if that's just going to be a little bit more resistance along the way. What I found is that the rope here is actually clearing the foot right up until about here. So it's only the last foot where the rope is actually going to bind on here and just rub over here. So it might be better, rather than going with the full redirection, is to reuse a piece off the treadmill. Just put that roller there, and then the rope would run over that. I think that's what I'm going to do. Just use that roller. Whether it's mounted that way or maybe out front a little bit like that. I think that's going to be a better approach. Oops, sorry. That might be a better approach. So I'm going to have a little think about that. But overall, woohoo, I'm happy. I think that's going to work really, really well. So that, my friends, represents the last of the updates on this round for the Worktable Sawmill. I'm sure there'll be more to come as we progress. So we've got our crank and foldaway handle all set to go. The dust collector is now epoxied onto our end shroud. Blade guard fully intact. A choke on the motor. Handle to raise and lower the sawmill. We're ready for another log. Want to see what's coming? So here I am at Woodstock, and I got a bunch of posts here, some cedar posts. These are former Powerline poles, but we're going to mill some good cedar out of that. So that's what's next. Stay tuned, like and subscribe.